Hi, Linda. It's Janice. We're having trouble hearing. I see that you're recording the presentation. Thank you so much. And it's about 11:02. We have almost 200 participants. My goodness. Thank you all for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you joining us to find out a little bit more about our products, our software. Let's get this sound fixed. Linda, can you hear me, please? Can you say hello?
And I'm so sorry. I was on mute. So
there you are. You. Wonderful.
All right,
I can hear you now. Start
Sorry.
from the top.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. And we do appreciate that you've been able to make time to attend this webinar. You may be joining from someplace that you're not normally working, and we appreciate that these are unusual times. And again, thanks for participating today. We are recording the session, and if you can see on the screen, we need everybody to please mute your phones and your videos to make sure we have enough bandwidth for everyone. If you have questions, please do post them on the chat box, and we will probably respond to you later. We will compile all the questions and answer them and post it on our CASAS website. On the website, if you go to the home page, there's a News and Updates webinar button that you can push to take you to the page that has, we'll have in a day or two the recording of today's webinar, the PowerPoint, and all the responses to any questions. And there you can also find previous webinar information and recordings. So today we are going to give you some updates about CASAS and talk about field testing and our upcoming tests, and then the bulk of the time we're going to spend on interpreting TOPSpro Enterprise skills reports. So let's dive right in. Basically, for the current situation where so many schools, if not perhaps all of them by now, are closing around the country, we are saying that CASAS testing is not permitted if your school is closed, because a proctor must be physically present to administer a CASAS test. And so what we're advising is that you would please wait until schools reopen to test your students. Now, this is, in some states, this is the rule. We are actually looking into the possibility of remote proctoring, but as it happens right now, at this moment, we have not approved that for any programs yet. We'll have to see if it's going to be possible. So I see there's a question about corrections. I mean, if you can have a proctor physically present, then you are welcome to test. But, and in corrections, I suppose that's the case. So yes, please go ahead. We're only giving this advice because most schools are closed. All right, so that is the basic guidance. And if you have any questions, you can post them and we will address them as best we can. Now, as far as field testing is concerned, I would like to ask Karen Berger to please address that. And Karen, okay. You are now unmuted.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Janice. So really, most of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have so generously contributed to our field testing efforts, both during this round and in the past. As many of you probably know, we are currently field testing ESL reading and listening series, and obviously we recognize that your regular program testing needs will take top priority when you are able to go back to school. For those of you who are already participating or were planning to participate, I'll be communicating with each of you individually, and we do appreciate all of your support. So if anyone has any questions, they can put them in the chat. I'm going to put my email address in the chat box if you want to send me a message. Thanks again.
Okay, this is Linda Taylor again. I do see a couple questions that I think I can respond to right now about the requirement for a proctor to be there. So one question was that if you have students coming into your school, then of course you can carry on with testing them as long as you have the computer that's fully registered if you're giving eTests, or if you're doing paper tests and you have a proctor there, and a proctor for eTests, of course. If you are going to be working in a different location, you still have, if it's eTests, you need the requirement of your of the computer being registered and a proctor being there. So, and I see there's a question about video proctoring. Yes, that's what I was saying earlier, is that it's sometimes also known as remote proctoring. We are looking into that, but at the moment we have not approved any of those options. So if you have a solution like that and you want to propose it to us, please communicate with us, and you'll see my email here soon, and you can let us know, and we will look into it with you. The thing is that it has to be secure, and there are solutions to that that may not be secure for remote proctoring, or that also may be quite expensive. So that's what we're, those are some of the constraints. All right.
Actually, if I can add one more note for those who are online within the California Department of Education, that they send a notice to all WIOA 2 grantees saying that the current status is you may not do CASAS testing remotely. So agencies will have to test their students in California upon reopening. And again, this doesn't apply to corrections. This is the WIOA grantees whose schools are closed right now.
And that's
but definitely, go ahead.
That's for California, just to be very clear. So your state may have different policies. All right. Then just this third bullet about CASAS ESL tests, that is something that is a little bit unknown at the moment. In recent webinars, I have told you that we're planning to submit our new reading and listening ESL tests in the Gold Series October 1st, but as this situation unfolds, we'll know better if we can still keep to that timeline. So we will keep you posted, and that, of course, relates to our ability to do field testing and your ability to do field testing. So that is the situation right now, is that it's unknown how that will proceed. All right, I'm going to carry on to the main body of our work today, which is talking about interpreting CASAS test reports, and especially the reports that inform instruction. And as we mentioned in the description of this webinar, we are focusing on the mid-year student. And one of the things that you should be doing at this point is, whether you've given one test already or 2 tests within the program year, or possibly more, is to look at the results and see how that should inform instruction for a student or for a class. So what we're going to do is start with some of the basics about what the reports cover. Then we're going to look at which reports can be most helpful to see how students may be doing well or need help, and look at areas for improvement. How do you see that on the reports? Look at some sample reports for one particular student. And then your homework assignment is to try to do some of this with your own data, whether it's individual or classroom class data, so that you can target instruction for your students. So hopefully this is some of this. I'm going to go very quickly through this part because I want to make sure we have enough time for the rest of the session. But just a quick review of some of the basics. about CASAS that these 4 components are there: curriculum, which is the content standards and competencies; assessment, which is the tests themselves; instruction, which is what you do in between tests, and we have some resources on in our quick search software; and accountability, which is the software that does automated scoring for eTests and that also generates all of the reports. For the content side, we have these 3 major components: content standards, competencies, and task areas. These are the CASAS content areas. And here's what they look like. The content standards, or basic skills content standards, in this case, in this situation of this item, are the academic skills measured. That's always the case. And in the case of this item, it's locate detail. So even in a very simple item, locate detail is the academic skill, the underlying skill for, in this case, reading. The CASAS competency, which is a measurable learning objective in a functional life skills context, in this case, is to read an activity schedule on a phone. The task area is the format of the test item, prompt or display, and in this case, it's a chart. So all of these 3 aspects are ones that we can look at in terms of a student's performance on every CASAS test item. Now, as far as the CASAS content standards are concerned, the 2009 version for reading is still the one that is in effect for the Life and Work reading series and the Life and Work 980 listening series. So we're going to be talking about a later version, but these are the ones that are currently occurring in the reports for the Life and Work series. And the math standards have not also changed since 2009. They are, when they were developed, they are very well aligned to the CCR, and so that is the current version. But we did revise the CASAS reading standards in 2016 and then made a second edition. And these are the ones that are used for the Reading Goals series, and they are in these reorganized categories with these number of standards for each one. And the important ones, of course, foundational literacy is at the very low levels. The second, third, and fourth categories are the ones that we mainly focus on in our test reporting: vocabulary questions, basic reading, and higher order reading. This is an excerpt from the CASAS reading standards, the 2016 version, second edition, and you can see that it's called RDG with a number. Here's the standard. Here is the reference to the CCR standards. In most cases, well, in this section, language and vocabulary, it could be a language standard or a reading or both. And here on the right, we see at the top, there's a key that shows the ABE and ASE NRS levels, 1 to 6, the ESL levels, 1 to 6, and how they relate to each other, and the CASAS levels, A to E. And these dots indicate which levels each of the standards we feel is appropriate for instruction. Now, in addition, with especially the new Reading Goals series that's aligned to the CCR, there's depth of knowledge comes into play, which is one depiction is in this wheel. But the college and career readiness standards play a big role and are very much aligned. Our test, the goal series, are strongly aligned to the CCR standards. Here's the reference for it. And I hope you are all very much aware of those standards. But they now also play a role in our tests. These standards were published in 2013 by the U.S. Department of Ed, and they are relevant for adult learners and are selected for, in terms of the ones that are most important for them to succeed in post-secondary training and in jobs. So this is the way that the CCR standards play out in terms of the Reading Goals series at a high level. There's these same three categories we saw in the new CASAS reading standards without language, but vocabulary, reading comprehension skills, and higher order in these subcategories. And these are categories that you will see on the report in just a minute. This is a snapshot of one of the CCR reading standards, and it shows how there are level-specific descriptors for each of these CCR standards. And these are important because students at the beginning level, that is the A level, can only ask and answer questions. That's the extent of their ability, but of course at the higher levels they can do much more. So this is what specifies what they can do at each level for each standard. Here's how it plays out in a sample item where this is a vocabulary question, and what we want to ask ourselves and understand is that every CASAS question is coded to these different content areas. So what reading standard is being tested here? And the answer to that is that there's a CASAS reading standard, which is RDG 2.3, Interpret General Academic Vocabulary. There's also a CCR standard that is measured in this item. That is R4, levels B and C, Interpret Words and Phrases in a Text. It's a concise version of that. So we can see that this item, in terms of the content standards, this is what is being measured, CASAS standards and CCR. Now also we have CASAS competencies. Here's one example of one from the employment section. And so we can ask what competency is being tested in this item, because every item tests not only content standards, but also competencies. So the competency being tested here is 4.2.4, Interpret Employee Handbooks, Personnel Policies, and Job Manuals. So every CASAS every CASAS test item relates to a particular CASAS competency. All right. Now we're going to get into the reports, and I'm going to ask Janice Farah to get involved here. Let me first just give you a little bit of an intro. We have, this is just some frequently used reports, and we want to make the distinction between score reports and skill reports. So in score reports, there's the information you're getting is a score. So you're in a personal score report, you find out the scale score that the student got on a particular test. In the next assigned test, it relates to the form, but it's about, based on the score that the student got on the previous test, what test should they take next. The test history also has the score, and the learning gains reports a score. The skill reports are the ones that cover the content we just talked about. And the main ones that we're going to go over today are the skills profile, content standards report, and competency performance report. And here they are again with a little bit more detail. We're going to look at two kinds of content standards reports and two kinds of competency reports. Now, this can be a bit overwhelming, but just to let you know that we do have two levels of access to TE, that is TOPSpro Enterprise. And the difference is how many reports and different features of TOPSpro Enterprise you can access with each package. It costs more to get the enhanced package, but you get more. With the basic package, you get, one of the main distinctions is you get reports for individual students and not classes. So if you want class reports, you have to have the enhanced package. And one of the things that is coming soon to basic access is that we are going to be making the content standards reports available, again, just for individual students in the basic package very soon. So not going to go into detail on this. Hopefully you've seen this in the training and you'll be able to study it later when you look at the PDF online. And if you have questions, of course, you can always go on the CASAS website to learn more about these things or call us. All right. Here we have an example of the personal score report. And now I'm going to hand it over to Janice to take us into a demo mode and get into TOPSpro Enterprise. And so I'm going to stop sharing and let Janice.
Here I am.
Okay.
All right, can you see my screen? This big white blank screen. I'm logged into the Rolling Hills database, which is one of our testbed sites. I'm logged in using an administrator generic login. And here we are looking at all the major ways to run reports in TOPSpro Enterprise. And the first one that Linda showed you was the personal score report, which is under CASAS eTests. I'm just moving my mouse around so I can go over and bring that up. All CASAS reports start with this first screen, which shows two sections. On the left, we call it the Report Setup Navigator. And this is where you can take a large agency, such as the Rolling Hills Adult School, which has over 5,000 students, and we can narrow down the field of students that we're going to run the report on. This has two purposes. One is for the ease of digging through the output, because it's much easier to look at a 4-page output than a 65-page output. Also, the speed to generate the report is much quicker, which you'll see as I demonstrate it. On the right side of the report, we have 5 sections, which are repeated so that it becomes kind of an easy-to-use user interface. We have the session name. We have common filters such as years and dates. We have output layout parameters, which include things that are anywhere from colors to security, like maybe we want to mask the student's name and only show the identifier. For this particular report, there's an option to show raw and scale score for optional forms, which is not one of the defaults. So what we're going to do, as Linda mentioned, we're going to pretend that we're in the middle of a program year and we have a particular student, and his name is Rida. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull him out of the students in program years selection. And what we're going to do is we're going to search using the buttons here under name to bring up a name that starts with Rida. And there he is. Now this box right here shows that it's checked. If you want to deselect and select it individually, you can do that too. All throughout the CASAS reports and in the what we call listers, which are ways to look at the database information, you'll see this symbol, which allows us to find something based on either whether it starts with a certain sequence of characters, ends with, contains, etc. So let's go ahead and generate this report. That's up here at the top. I'm going to click on Generate. And when a report is running, you'll see the yellow or the orange wheel spinning, means that the database is gathering the data to produce the report. And here it is. This is the personal score report for this particular student. And what we have are 3 pages. The first page shows the first test that he took back in January, including some information and scores. I'm going to let Linda dig into this a little bit more, but let me first give you the overview. The second page is the second test that he took in that same series back in March. And she'll talk a little bit about the different scores involved. And then down at the bottom of all CASAS reports is the criteria, which is a way of trapping all the choices that you made back here when you defined it, including what was the years that were tested, any of the special options down at the bottom. Now we can display this a lot of different ways, and I'll go in as we start looking at some of the other, like the individual skills profile report. We can change the settings, we can make it wider, we can bring up 2 pages, we can squish it onto 1 page, we can change the settings. But for now, I think, Linda, how would you like to see it? Would you like it fit to 1 page?
No, I think the previous view we can see it a little bigger. There we go.
There you are.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just to mention that here you can see that it's a reading test that Rida took. It's Form 907, which is a Level D test, CASAS Level D, the date. And what we've recently improved is that scale score, which is the big piece of information you want to know, is large and green. And also the NRS level is something that displays now by default. Then if you scroll down a bit, we can see that you can also, we made some recent changes to the way that the thermometer is displayed, because now we have the NRS levels on the left. This is an ABE student, so we have the ABE NRS levels 1 through 6, and then the CASAS scores listed there are not just, 200, 205, 210, but they are the actual cut points between that mark the NRS levels for ABE and ASE. So this way you can clearly see that RIDA is just a little around, more or less around halfway through NRS level 4 for ABE, and that you can visually see with the way that it's depicted. There's also some text about what a student can generally do at this level when they have the score. So now if we want to scroll down, we can see that what happened at the post-test for RIDA is that RIDA got a 245. Very good. And made a lot of progress. And if you scroll down, we can then see that RIDA's score now puts him in NRS 5. So RIDA has made an NRS level gain, that's clear, and RIDA can also clearly understand that. Okay.
Great. If you have any questions about this report, go ahead and you can put them into the chat box and we will get back to you on that.
Yeah, there's a quick question about the cost. If it's an ASL student, rather, then the ESL NRS levels would be shown and the related scores for ESL.
Okay. Shall we go on to the next report?
Yes.
Okay. So the 3 reports we're going to focus on now fall under reports, test results. We're going to look at the individual skills profile, the student content standard performance report, and the student competency performance. First things first, individual skills profile. Looks familiar, now you know what this is, the report setup navigator. Let's grab our sample student again. Okay, now let's look and see if there are any settings we want to change. We've got the name and the filters. Scroll down a little bit. All right, we want to show the grade level equivalent, just to clarify that. So I'm going to click on that box and off to generate. Again, because we use the navigator to select just one student, it runs a lot faster than if you ran this on an entire program. Here's the individual skills profile report. Again, same format, student information at the top. Again, if you want to, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to show that this one is run for the most recent test on 3/6. Now, if we want to change that and go back to the prior one, we can just click on the layout settings button, go up and select the different, oh, actually we have to go rerun it. Let's go rerun it. Linda, would you like to start with the January one first?
Yes.
We can go by assessment date. So we'll look at the January assessments from January to, let's say, February 1st and generate that. Now, anytime you have a report, you can see up on my desktop here, I have output reports from the individual skills profile. You do that using the export button, and you can save it either in Adobe PDF format, Word, Excel is another popular way to save the data here. Okay, so here's the individual skills profile report for January 16th. Again, you can show it in 2 pages format. We could fit width. We can scroll down a little bit. Linda, do you want to share a little bit about this?
Sure. So this gives an overview of the different types of content that we went over in the very beginning. And this is just scroll up for a second. This is this 907R, so it's a level D reading test. And so And we can see at the top it also tells you how many items were in the test, the number correct, the raw score. Of course, the scale score was over there on the just show that the scale score is the most important thing, of course. But it does tell you how many they got right, and in fact that they attempted all 40 looks like. And then the grade level equivalent is there because we asked for it. You do need to ask for it. Now, below on the right side, just under this the top legend, you can see the college and career readiness, the CCR reading standards categories that we saw earlier. You can see the subcategories, so there's vocabulary, and under that academic or meaning from context. You can see which CCR standard it relates to in the second column, and then you can see how many questions there are in each category. And in this case, there are 4 in each of those subcategories. And in January, RIDA only got 1 out of those 4 right. So that wasn't very good. And then in the reading comprehension skills category, they RIDA got, well, you can see it in locate details. That's R1. RIDA got 42% of the 7 items correct. Okay. And then in the other category, identify main idea, did a little better with 66%, but only 3 questions in that category. So that is not as many questions, but still probably enough to see something about how the student did. In the higher order reading skills, the biggest category is the locate and compare details, R1 and R9. Here you can see RIDA did poorly, 18% of those correct. This is a more difficult, cognitively higher depth of knowledge in the higher order reading skills, more critical thinking required. So only 18% of those were correct. And another area that was rather weak is the next one, text structure, only 33% correct in the January test. In the other 2 categories, there were 4 questions, and RIDA got half of them right. All right, so we're going to look at that in a minute and compare it to how RIDA did in the post-test. Now, just below there, you can see that there is information on the likelihood of passing the HiSET test. And because this is a reading test, it's showing about the language arts and reading. And at this point in time, what the advice to RIDA is that RIDA needs more study before RIDA is advised to attempt to take the HiSET in language arts and reading. So if RIDA had scored higher, then we might see something else there, that what the percentage of passing, likelihood of passing might be. But in this case, at this point, RIDA needs more study before taking the test as far as the recommendation is concerned. Now, on the left side of this report, let's go to the top, we can see the reading competency areas. And there, again, you can see the number of questions in each category and the percent correct in each one. So there, generally, we can see that in employment, only 17% correct, and in government and law, 25%. That's pretty low. So those would be areas that you could focus on in terms of the context of the reading passage. And then reading tasks. These are the task areas and how the reading is displayed. And so on this Form 907, there are 4 questions that are in the form of a form. And that wasn't, RIDA didn't do very well on those, only 25% correct. Also in charts, only none of those did he get correct. So those are 2 areas that certainly need more work, as well as, the articles, that's text. So only a third of those right, but that probably generally reflects that RIDA didn't do very well. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but his level was lower at the time of this testing. And just you can see on the bottom left, it does give you the NRS levels and the cut points, so that's there for reference. Okay, so now let's take a quick look at his post-test, which was in March. And we had already generated that. No, we're going to generate it again.
We're going to grab it again.
Huh?
We're going to go ahead and grab that again.
right, so here we have March 6th. We saw this before in the personal score report, but his score was 245. Then now we can see in the reading competencies just below there that, of course, he did better overall, and he improved also very much in some of the areas. So we're going to look in more detail at this later when we can see these results side by side. But just so you know, you can get the overview in this individual skills profile. And also for the CCR standards, you can see there how he did in each of these categories. So, and then now, if we look at the likelihood of passing, Rida with a score of 245 has done so much better that he now has a 78% chance of passing the HiSET language arts and reading section. So that's how it changes when the score improves. I want to let you know that we are going to be adding this information for the GED shortly. So please look out for that, and there is a way to indicate in the settings which one of those you want. We'll show you that in a minute. All right, I think that's good for now.
Okay, on to the next report. Under test results, we're going to look at the student content standards performance. Let's select our student. And then let's look at the general settings, because this is a report that has a few special options. So let's scroll down to the special options. And this is where you can specify if you want the output to be content standards with just the simple test or with the more detailed test items. So Linda, I think we're going to start with this, the more compact one, the test. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now this produces a report with one page for January and then another page for March. So as Linda mentioned, it's kind of helpful to look at the two side by side briefly to see what they look like. The test and content standard with the two different dates.
So this is showing you the CASAS reading standards. If you remember in the previous chart, we were seeing the CCR, and I forgot to mention that if you want to see the CASAS standards in the individual skills profile, you can choose to have that display rather than the CCR. But we thought you would mostly want to see the CCR, and so that's what we have as the default. But when to get into this level of detail, and also to be able to compare them easily, you can look at the CASAS reading standards, and they're very similar actually to the CCR. And here we can see, for example, in the January test, as in RDG 2.3, only 25% of those academic vocabulary questions were right. We saw that same result from the CCR. So you can see there's similar results from the CASAS reading standards and the CCR. And so, you know, this is how you can see the number of items for each reading standard and the percent correct for this individual student. So looking down, you know, we want to see, well, where did they do poorly, and particularly poorly on RDG 4.3, where they didn't get any correct. But of course, there were only 2 questions, but still they didn't get either of them right. And this is about inference. No, sorry, it's not. This is about what the text says explicitly by comparing details. So this is just getting details from a text. But from multiple sources, that's the R9. So that's something that you might want to work on, is helping them to be able to look at 2 different passages or documents and be able to get information from both. And then in the next one, for RDG 4.4 is about inference, and you can see there that they only got 22% of those correct. So that's certainly an area you would want to work on. And 4.7 also the overall structure, which we saw before in the CCR one, is the text structure. Okay, so now scroll down just a little bit. We can see the full thing. Okay, And you can see that for most of them, except most of them, there are multiple items, 3 or 4. Just in one of them, RDG 3.14, author's purpose, on this test, there's only one question. And so there, even though you want to take that with a grain of salt, even the next one, as far as how much inference you can draw from that, because it was only 1 or 2 items. So, you know, you might need more information to know how much time to devote to that, because it may be something else about the question that they didn't understand rather than the content standard, because it was just one question or 2. All right, now let's take a look at, if we could see them side by side, then we can compare. And I know that's extremely small. Janice, I think we could make it a little bit bigger when we, or no, maybe it doesn't get bigger. When it's on your own computer, you'll be able to see it more closely and a little better, but when it's a little better. Okay, all right, so hopefully you can see that well enough to just get some idea that this is where you can more easily compare across. Now, just one thing to notice is that on the second test, the post-test on the right, it's a little longer, you can see that. There is, the standards that are measured are not exactly the same. So on the post-test, which is Form 908, there's RDG 2.7, and that standard is not measured on the pretest. So that's why they're not exactly the same standards that are measured, but pretty darn close. So, and here we can see that, of course, we know that Ryder did generally better, but we can see the areas that he improved, and then we can still see that if we go down to RDG 3.14, that's still 33%. So that's author's purpose. That's something you still want to work on. And then the second to the last one is the author's point of view. So that's another area that needs improvement. Okay, so this is it's how you can see them side by side, and you can look in detail and make a plan for the student. This is with the basic access. You can do this for individual students. If you have the enhanced, you can print out a report just like this that's for your whole class if you've created classes. And then you're able to see the percentage pre and post for the whole class. Okay, so now let's maybe go and look at the more detailed version of this content standards report. And that's called the test item and content standard.
Right.
And all right, so we're looking at the January test results, and here there's a lot of information. It shows on the left the CASAS reading standards, and you can see the percent correct on the standards and percent incorrect. And then what's laid out here is the competencies. So you can see how the competencies and the content standards relate on a particular, well, you can see that how they go together. And the X's, the red X's, it means the student got that question wrong, and the dots mean they got the question right. So we know that they only got 25%. That's 1 out of 4 of these on the reading 2.3. So that's why we see 3 red X's and 1 black dot. Okay, and you can then see the competencies on the top. So the one that Ryder got right is competency 4.6.3. All right, so this is a lot more detail. You can also see it for the post-test and compare. All right, and there's a key at the bottom that explains
Oops, sorry.
what the symbols are. Yeah. All right. All right, let's carry on. I think let's go on to the competency reports.
I'm going to select the student. And double check which special settings we might want.
We want test and competency first. Oh, wait,
right.
no, test. Competency, test item and competency, yes.
So we'll start with the more detailed one. And
Yes.
then as it goes down through the list, it becomes more and more succinct.
Mm-hmm. One thing to emphasize also is that in the new goals series, the focus is more on the content standards, which we just talked about. But still, the competencies do come into play. But one of the things you'll notice right away in this report, this is the January test, the 907, and you can see this is in item order, so it goes 1 through 40. You can see that it tells you, let's scroll up just a little bit, whether he got the item correct or not, yes or no, the competency number, the 3-digit version, that's what this report gives you, the 3-digit 2.8.6. And that is interpret information from schools and communicate with school personnel. That's what that detailed 3-digit competency is. The task area for this is 3, which is text. And so that's a nice thing about this report is the task area is very clear here. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the first 4 questions are all the same competency. Because in the goals series, we have only coded 1 competency to each reading passage. So in this set of 4 test questions, they all have the same reading passage. It's about interpret information from schools, and all those test questions are only coded to the 1 competency. So, and if we can see the next 2 questions, 5 and 6, is the next competency, interpret information on medications, and so on. So, of course, you may know that in the Life and Work Reading and Life and Work Listening series for ESL, the current series, we have coded every test question to a competency. So sometimes within a reading passage, they might be the same competency or they might possibly be different. And we've also, in that series, the ESL series, we've coded to multiple competencies for a given item. So in an effort to streamline the information you're getting and make it easier to target instruction in a meaningful way, drawing from the test results, we've made these changes in the goals series, and with the new ESL series, we'll have those same changes. So this report, if this is the one you've been using, I think you can see in the goals series, this test item and competency report is really unnecessarily duplicative. It's very detailed, but it's hard to read because it just keeps repeating the same information for the first 4 questions, etc. So now we're going to show you how to see something that's a lot easier to read and gives you the same information.
So we're going to select test and competency and select apply.
So here we have the same, let's see. Why is it not? Oh, it's not in item order.
Would you like to sort it?
You know, I don't think it will. Yes, I would like to. Let's sort it and then show them how to do that. And maybe we can sort it by competency number.
Sure. So the page sort order, these are the 4 different fields that we can sort on for the report. So did you want to sort on the competency number, Linda?
Yes.
Okay, so we can just click on that and we can say we want that as the first sort order. And then down at the bottom, I'm going to click on apply. It's taking the same data and just rearranging the way it's displayed.
So here we can the same passage, which was interpret information from schools and communicate with school personnel, right? We saw that before, but now we only see it written once, so it's much easier to read. And it's the same information we had before. So that is with the 3-digit competencies. Now, So we would recommend that you do this. And let's pull up the post-test, and then we can show how we can see both on the screen and compare them. Okay, so here again, if it's your own computer, you'll be able to see it more clearly, but you can see them side by side. And you can see that we don't, in the goal series, and even in Life and Work, we don't always test exactly the same competencies on the pre and post test, or in fact, you might have someone take a level C pre-test and a level D post-test, depending on how they do. So, but still, you can compare their results if you want to on the two tests in terms of the competencies. Now, one more thing you can do. Let's go back to the first, just the one report on one page so we can see it better. You'll see here that it is in competency order, but there are there's 4 different sets of items on this test that are in employment. So one thing we could do to see that a little more clearly and a little more generally is another way to generate the competencies. Let's go back and show by something. This is a 3-digit we've been seeing, but there's something called competency category, which is 2 digits only. Let's take a look at that. You know, teachers can be overwhelmed with a lot of detail, and this is a way that they can get a sense of where the item content is in the test and how their students did in a more general way. And here you can see that in the 2-digit version, this competency category, you can see in each of these areas, a little slightly more general competency areas, how they did. Okay, and again,
the number of items, right? The number of items is still over on the right side. You can still see the number of items, but it allows your eyes to kind of scroll down through the number correct and just pick up the ones like maybe these 2 that you want to focus on. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thanks, that's great. Yeah, because I was looking around for them too, and there they were on the right. Also, you can, again, look here and see, you know, which area it has the lowest percentages and then focus on that. And again, this is for an individual student, but you could do the same for a class, and that way you can target instruction for the entire class. Okay. I think, was that the extent of what we were going to show, I think? Janice, we can go back to the PowerPoint unless, is there something else we wanted to go over here in demo mode?
No, I think that's everything that we had talked about. We could always, looking at the time, we've got 5 minutes, so let me go ahead and stop sharing and send it back to you, Linda.
Okay. I see there's a question in the chat about a class report, and that is something maybe we can do in another webinar. We're not set up to do it for today, but that's a great idea. And I actually want to say that, you know, please, in the chat box, if you have suggestions for future webinar topics, whether general or specific suggestions, please tell us, because that's how we really can tailor this to your needs. So just to wrap up in the last few minutes, you know, standardized tests are extremely important. They may not get into exactly what you're teaching in your particular classroom, but it is the way that we communicate our success to our funding sources, to the powers that be able to compare them and to show off our progress and our learners' progress. So the only way to do that is with standardized tests. With, you know, none of them are perfect, but we try to make them as best as they can be, and we do want you to take advantage of these reports so that you can really use all the information that is within them to help your students improve. The library of reports in TE, Janice, you want to speak to this for just a sec?
I'm sorry, the library of reports? Well, absolutely. There are over 120 different reports within TOPSpro Enterprise, and they cover all the different ways that a data manager would want to clean up their data, to drill down into the information, to run reports for both state and federal, to look at the student records, to look at the class records. We have reports for agencies. We have reports for consortiums. So a little bit of everything for all different kinds of purposes.
And we do have self-paced trainings on CASAS.org. So if you, we have in previous webinars, we have done some tours of our website to show you where to find some of those resources. We do have some new training modules that are coming out soon, and they do go into more detail about, especially in terms of what we covered today in Module 2, about how to navigate and get these reports in TOPSpro, and also in Module 4 about those reports. So there are more resources coming to help you to do even more with what you have with you in your, in terms of test results and interpreting them. I want to tell you that our upcoming next one of these webinars is April 22nd, and then on May 20th. And so please do put them on your calendar and attend if you can. But as I mentioned earlier, we always record them, and the recordings and all the related documents are on the CASAS website. Maybe I can show you that in just a second. As far as the Summer Institute is concerned, we are looking into whether we're going to have it as a physical event or what, and so we will be letting you know as we come to some of those tough decisions, as many other conferences have had to recently. Here's the information with our emails if you would like to connect with us. And I think I'm just going to quickly go to the CASAS website and show you where you can find the place for these webinars. So if you go to the CASAS homepage, and then if you see on the right, the third one down, it says News and Updates Webinars. So if I click on that, it takes you to the page for these webinars. And today's is no longer upcoming. We'll change that. But that was today's, and it shows the upcoming dates. And then the last webinar, which was February, you can see we have the PDF that you can download, the chat box responses. We have a very nice document that has common acronyms, and another PDF, which was one of the documents we shared. So you can just listen to the webinar, you can look at the documents without that, and so on. It keeps going back. So please do take advantage of that if you missed any. And if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it today, you can tell them that here's where they can go to hear about today's webinar. So we've come to the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for participating today. And we will get back to you with answers to your chat box questions. And again, please stay safe in this difficult time.